Alright, ladies and gentlemen, we are back to do exercise 8-2 in the text here. And what we're doing is we're looking at the future value assignment that we had worked on before. And what we're going to do is we're going to create an array that holds the values that we enter in here and the values that are produced by this for a set number of attempts that we're going to put into this. So once again, we're not going to do any changes to the code or anything like, or the design or anything like that. We're going to go straight into the code, and we're going to look at the things that we're supposed to be doing here. And the first thing that it says is we want to declare class variables for a row counter and a rectangular array of strings that provides for 10 rows and 4 columns. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and create that string array. Now, the way that we're going to do this, or the way that I'm going to do this, is I'm going to create a two-dimensional array. Because it's going to be 10 rows, 4 columns, I'm not going to worry about doing the jagged array like that was specified in the text. We're just going to do a straight-up two-dimensional array. So I do that with a set of square brackets and a column in there, or a comma in there, and then I'm just going to call this information. And let me change this to values. We'll use values. And we're going to assign that as a new string array that has 10 rows and 4 columns. And then we're going to create an integer variable that's going to keep track of our rows, row counter, and we're going to assign that initial value of 0 because we always want to start at that 0th row, or the first row if you're looking at it that way. So this is our array, and this is our row counter. So now we can come down here into the calculate method and store those values in the array. So we're starting with a row counter of 0. So in our overarching array, we're going to have a 0, and then each element within that array is going to have going to hold one of these values. So for instance, we want to hold, we're going to take our values at the index of row counter, and then the secondary index is going to be 0. It's going to be at that first spot. And we're going to assign it the value of the monthly interest rate. I'm sorry, not the monthly interest rate, the monthly investment. That's what we want. Then values at the index of row counter 1 is going to be assigned the value of interest rate. And I'm going to get to something here in just a second. You'll see that I have the red squiggly lines, and there's a reason for that, and I know about it, but I just wanted to get the information in here first, and then I'll worry about fixing those. Years, and then values, row counter 3 is going to be our future value. Okay, so now why am I getting these red squiggly lines? Why am I getting these errors? Well, if you remember correctly, I created values to hold string values. So basically what we're going to do is in our display, wherever that went, in our display, we have that we display the values in certain ways. So when we display the future value, it comes out as a $ with this C. But to do that, we use a toString method. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a toString method on all of these to create a string out of them, and then we can store that string in our values array. The interest rate is going to be a percentage, so we'll use that as P1. Years is fine to be left alone as that because it's an integer. It's just going to count the number of years. And then toString, and again, this is a currency. So that got rid of all of our errors, and that got rid of, and that allows us to store the strings with the proper format, the currency, the percentage, and the currency, as part of the actual array. So when we go to display it, we don't have to tell it, hey, you need to change this to a currency, or you need to change this to a percentage. It's already stored in the array as such. Oops. And then just like the exercise 8-1, we need to go ahead and increase the row counter. So the next time that we enter a value in here, it will go into the row counter at the next index. So pretty much everything here is set up about the same as we did before, with the exception of we have these secondary markers that allow us to use the second element of our array, or the second level of our array. So then we want to go up here and we want to do what we did in 8.1, and we want to go ahead and display a message when a message box when the user exits that shows all of the values. And we're going to do that by starting with a string. I'll call it message again. But instead of starting with an empty string like I did before, I'm actually going to start with the headers of our form. So it's going to be inv/mo, and then I'm going to put a tab between each one of these things as indicated by the text, and future value, and after that I'm going to put a new line character. So if I run this now, let me go ahead and just do message box box.show, and we're just going to show the message, and I'll put a future values as my header. If I do this now and run this, I'm just going to hit exit. I'm not going to put anything in there because we haven't actually done anything with the loops in here with the arrays, so it's not going to matter. If I hit exit now, I get these, and they're spaced apart about how I want them. Now if I wanted more space between each one, I could hit a second tab in there and it would expand it. But basically what I've done is I've just laid this out kind of in a grid pattern, so when we look at this, whenever I go to put the next values in there, I can put a tab between each one of those, and it's going to line everything up with these headers. And let's go ahead and do that now. So what we're going to do now is we're actually going to create a nested loop for getting the information out of both the outer, the higher level of the array and the lower level of the two-dimensional array. And the way that we do this, and there's probably a couple of different ways to do this, but this is kind of what I've come to know as the standard. So we're going to have an integer called I, the iterator, assign an initial value of 0. We're going to say I is less than, and this is where it kind of differs a little bit from normal. So we're not going to get the length necessarily. We're going to do this get length method of the, and then pass in a 0 to as a parameter. So what get length does, that should be a semicolon. What get length does is it gets the length of a of an element or of a level of a multi-dimensional array. So we have this multi-dimensional array. When I created up here, it came with 10 elements down and 4 elements across. So if I were to actually sketch this thing out, it would look something like this. Let me go ahead and put this in some comments. So it's going to look something like this. We have 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 2, 0, 3, and then this is going to be 1, 0. Let me go put a space up there so they all look the same. 1, 1, 1, 2, and 1, 3. And then that's going to go on, oops, until I finally get to 9, 0, 9, 1, 9, 2, and 9, 3. Basically what's happening here is this right here is an array in and of itself. So this is, we'd set this up as an array, something like that, and that's an array in and of itself. So when we look at getting the elements from an array, normally what we would do is, if we had an array, a normal array of individual numbers, it would look something like 0. I'm going to do this in curlies, like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on until whatever number we got to, and that would be the end of it. So if we had a normal array, it would look like that. Well, we have an array that's not quite normal because it's an array of arrays, and basically the way to find this element here is to look at the 0th row and the 0th column. And whatever value we would put there, that's how we would refer to it. So let me actually go ahead and replace this with some values real quick. I'm not going to do them all. I'm just going to go ahead and do these. If I wanted to find this value, I would look for whatever this array is called at the index of 0, 0, like that, and it's going to return the value 1. That's return, not return. So that's how we work with multidimensional arrays. So what we want to do with, I'm going to erase all that, you don't need it. What we need to do with this is we need to figure out a way to get to that values at the value of 0, 0 to be able to display that value. So what we're going to do with that is we start with an array that, or start with a loop that starts at a value of 0. And then we do a second loop. And again, this is just kind of a convention that when you use I for your outer iterator, you use J for your inner iterator. And if you have another level of arrays, you would use K, L, M, and so forth. Again, that's just kind of convention, not required. And again, we're going to use get length. And then this time we're going to use 1, because that's going to be our inner array. And this time, the most important thing about this, for sure, is making sure that you keep track of your iterator variables. So for anything that has to do with the outer, the higher level array, the initial level of the array, you need to make sure you're using 1. And anything for that second level, you need to use J. One thing that I'll notice a lot is people will do I++ here. This will increment the value of I each time until J is less than, or until J is equal to or greater than the length. If you never increment I, that's never going to happen, and you're going to create yourself an infinite loop. So make sure you don't do that. But all we're going to do now is we're just going to take the message, and we're going to concatenate the string.format with a new line character, or not a new line, a tab, I'm sorry. And then we're going to say values at the index of I, J. So the first time through this outer loop, we're going to set the value to 0, and then we're going to create another inner loop that sets it to J. So the first thing we're going to hit is 0, 0, which is going to get us that first value. It's going to be the first row of our entries, and it's going to be whatever was in the 0th index. And if we come back down here, the 0th index was the monthly investment rate, or the monthly investment, sorry. And then it's going to put a tab after that, and it's going to end this loop, and then it's going to increment J again. Then it's going to go to I is still 0 because we haven't ended the loop yet. J is now 1, which is going to be our interest rate. Then that part of the loop ends and it goes back up here, increments J again. J is now 2, which is our years. Again, J becomes 3, which becomes our future value. Now J gets compared to the length, which is 4 of the inner of the J array. Once J gets incremented to 4, it is no longer less than that value. So this loop ends, and then this loop gets to increment I finally to 1. Once I gets incremented to 1, this loop can start all over again by setting J back to 0, which again, we start with monthly investment, interest rate, years, and so forth. Well, after we do this, we need to make sure that we add a new line character outside of the J loop. So we're going to add the values of the I index starting with 0. J is 0, 1, 2, and 3. After it gets to 3, this loop is going to end. We want to add a new line character, otherwise we're just going to keep building out a long string. Once we add that new line character, we can end the I loop and increment the I loop by 1, and we can continue going through everything that's supposed to. So let's go ahead and give this a try, and we'll just see if everything works. So we're going to do a $100 investment. We'll do a 4% interest rate for 5 years. We get $6,652.00. We will do a 4.5 interest rate, which gets us $6,739.73. And then we'll do a 5% interest rate, which gets us $6,828.94. Now these are the examples that were used in the text, so we'll just kind of see what this looks like whenever we exit the program. And it didn't do anything for us. And you might be saying, now why wouldn't that do anything for us? And there's a simple reason for that, and that was really just a mistake on my part. The message box show happens before the loop, so we want to put that after the loop, or else message doesn't hold anything other than this header information. So that's my fault. So we'll go ahead and we'll do the same values again. And then we exit, and now we have our values. Everything is lining up as it should, so that looks good to me. And that's the way it should work. So now we can go ahead and we can, it asks us to do up to 10, to do 10 values. So we're just going to do, I'm just going to increase the interest rate each time. Okay, now on this one, you'll notice I started at 1.0, so going up to 1.9, that is our 10 iterations. As I go ahead and I try to enter 2, it's going to give me that index out of range again, because again, I set up my array to be 10 rows, 4 elements. So there's my index out of bounds array. I could go and I could catch this index out of range exception if I wanted to and display a message. But now I have all 10 of my things. One thing that I noticed here, just kind of interesting to me, but we can go ahead and fix this. We'll fix a couple of things here. The first thing that I noticed is that whenever I did it with just 3 values, and I'll do it with 1 again, we'll just say 100, 1, 1, and I calculate that. Whenever I exit, I get all of this white space down there. So the way that I'm going to fix that is I'm just going to go ahead and look for a value within that array and say if it's empty, skip the, go ahead and skip. So what we wanted to say is say if values at I0 is equal to an empty string, we're just going to say continue. And what continue does is it just skips over the rest of the loop. So none of this other stuff should happen, and let's see how that works. So we'll just say 100, 1, 1, and I want to go ahead and exit, still did that. So that's not how I wanted it to work. Okay, well, I'm sure there's probably a way that we can go in here and we can fix this. Let me go ahead and try a couple of things on pause real quick, and I'll come right back to it. All right, so I was on the right track of what I was trying to do here, but basically what we want to do is we want to see if the string portion of one of these is empty. So what we're going to do is we're going to say if string dot is null or empty, and then put in values at the index of I0. and then we can say continue, and that skips the rest of the loop. So now when we go in here and we'll put in our values of 100, 1% interest rate for 1 year, let's do 1.1 for 1 year, and we'll do 1.2 for 1 year. Whenever I go to exit now, I don't have that huge box anymore, so that's how we're going to handle that. I don't know if the is null or empty method is covered in the text, but it is one that's available. It allows us to see if a string is empty or null, and if it is, it returns true. And then we can go ahead and, like I said, we can continue, which skips the rest of this loop, which means that we don't do the J loop, we don't add the tabs, and we don't add the new line character. So that's how we're going to shrink our box down to normal size. You're more than welcome to look through the text and see if there's another way that the text states that it can be done. But this is how I would do it, is the is null or empty method. The other thing I'm going to want to do is I'm going to go ahead, we have this try catch statement here. Let's just go ahead and catch the index out of range exception, just so we can show string.format. You can only add 10 future values. Too many values. That should be it. So now we're going to go back through. I'm just going to go ahead and add 100, 12, and 1 year. And we'll calculate that. I'm just going to go ahead and add this 10 times. And then after the 10 times says too many values, you can only add 10 values. And that's what I have here. So, wow, a 1,200% interest rate. That's probably not correct. Is that what it said with the 4%? That is a 400%, so I need to, this shouldn't be P1. This probably should be like F1 or something like that. So let's see. There we go. And then if we wanted to, we could do the plus percent. Oops, that's not what I want. Percent, and that will give us our percentage sign as well. So 100, 1, exit, gives us a 1%, 1 year. There we go. That kind of cleans that up a little bit. Other than giving, because before it was giving me like a 400% interest rate, which I didn't catch before. So that should be everything that we need on this one. Sorry, I kind of got jumbled there toward the end with trying to figure this part out. But I think that all makes sense and how it should all work. If you have any questions about anything, of course, by all means, give me a holler, and I will answer as quickly as I can. Other than that, have a great rest of your week, and best of luck.